Hey 10YLC, I'm going to be reading you a book called The Bridge to Terabithia. This is by Catherine Patterson and illustrated by Donna Diamond. Chapter 1 is called Jesse Oliver Aarons Jr. Bada boom, bada boom, bada bing, bada bing. Good! His dad had the pickup going. He could get it now. Jess slid out of bed and onto his overalls. He didn't worry about a shirt because once he began running, he would be hot as a popping grease. Even in the morning, air was chilly. Or shoes because the bottoms of his feet were now as tough as worn-out sneakers. Where are you going, Jess? Maybelle lifted herself up sleepily from the double bed where she and Joyce Ann slept. Shh, he warned. The walls are thin. Mama would be mad as a fruit fly if they woke her up at this time of day. He patted Maybelle's hair and yanked the twisted sheet up to her small chin. Just over the cow field, he whispered. Maybelle smiled and snuggled down under her sheet. Gonna run? Maybe. Of course he was going to run. He had gotten up early every day all summer to run. He figured if he worked at it, and Lord, he'd worked at it, he could be the fastest runner in 5th grade when school opened up. He had to be the fastest, not one of the fastest or next to the fastest, but the fastest, the very best. He tiptoed out of the house. The place was so ratty that it screeched wherever you put your foot down. But Jess had found that if you tiptoed, it gave only a low moan. And he could usually get outdoors without waking Mama or Ellie or Brenda or Joyce Ann. Maybelle was another matter. She was going on 7 years old, and she worshipped him, which was okay sometimes. When you were the only boy smashed between 4 sisters, and the older 2 had despised you ever since you stopped letting them dress you up and wheel you around in their rusty old doll carriage, and the little one cried if you looked at her cross-eyed, it was nice to have somebody who worshipped you, even if it got unhandy sometimes. He began to trot across the yard. His breath was coming out in little puffs, cold for August. But it was early yet. By noontime, when his mom would have him out working, it would be hot enough. Miss Bessie stared at him sleepily as he climbed across the scrap heap and over the fence and into the cow field. "Mrrr," she said, looking for all the world like another Maybelle with her big brown droopy eyes. "Hey, Miss Bessie," Jessie said soothingly. "Just go back to sleep." Miss Bessie strolled over to the greenish patch. Most of the field was brown and dirty, and yanked up a mouthful. What do you think Miss Bessie is? I think she must be a cow. "That a girl. Eat your breakfast. Don't pay me no mind." There he is, getting ready to run. He always started at the northwest corner of the field, crouched over like the runners he had seen on the wild world of sports. "Bang!" he said, and took off flying around the cow field. Miss Bessie strolled toward the center, still following with her droopy eyes, chewing slowly. She didn't look very smart, even for a cow, but she was plenty bright enough to get out of Jesse's way. His straw-colored hair flapped hard against his forehead, and his arms and legs flew out every which way. He had never learned to run properly, but he had long legs for a 10-year-old, and no one had more grit than him. Lark Creek Elementary was short on everything, especially athletic equipment, so all the balls went to the upper grades at recess time after lunch. Even if a 5th grader started out the period with the ball, it was sure to be in the hands of a 6th or 7th grader by the time the hour was over. The older boys always took the dry center of the upper field, for their ball games, while the girls claimed the small top section for hopscotch and jump rope and hanging around talking. So the lower grade boys had started this running thing. They would all line up on the far side of the field where it was either muddy or deep, crusty ruts. Earl Watson, who was no good at running, had a big mouth and would yell, "Bang!" and they'd race to a line they'd towed across to the other end. One time last year, Jesse won. Not just the first heat, but the whole shebang, but only once. But it had put into his mouth a taste for winning. Ever since he'd been in first grade, he'd been that crazy little kid that draws all the time. But one day, April 22nd, a drizzly Monday it had been, he ran ahead of all of them, the red mud slooching up through the holes in the bottom of his sneakers. For the rest of that day, and until lunch on the next, he had been the fastest kid in third, fourth, and fifth grades, and the only fourth grader. On Tuesday, Wayne Pettis had won again, as usual. But this year, Wayne Pettis would be in sixth grade. He'd play football until Christmas and baseball until June with the rest of the big guys. Anybody had a chance to be the fastest runner. And by Miss Bessie, this year it was going to be Jesse Oliver Aarons Jr. Jesse pumped his arms harder and bent his head for the distant fence. He could hear the third grade boys screaming him on. They would follow him around like a country music star, and Maybelle would pop her buttons. Her brother was the fastest, the best. That ought to give the rest of the first grade something to chew on. Even his dad would be proud. Jess rounded the corner. He couldn't keep going so fast, but he continued running for a while, and it would build up. Maybelle would tell Daddy, so it wouldn't look as though Jess was a bragger. Maybe Dad would be so proud he'd forget all about how tired he was from the long drive back and forth to Washington and digging and hauling all day. He would get right down on the floor and wrestle the way they used to. Old Dad would be surprised how strong he got in the last couple years. His body was begging him to quit, but Jess pushed it on. He had to let that puny chest of his know who was boss. Jess, it was Maybelle yelling from the other side of the heap. Mama says you gotta come in and eat now. Leave the milking till later. Oh, crud, he'd run too long. Now everyone would know he'd been out and start in on him. All right, okay, yeah. He turned, still running, and headed for the scrap heap without breaking his rhythm. He climbed over the fence, scrambled across the scrap heap, thumped Maybelle on the head, ow, and trotted on into the house. And I'll read some more later.